Welcome to the Talent Transformation Podcast. Today we have Tim Pröhm, VP of Digital Transformation at Kelly Services. Tim, pleasure to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dimitri. Super exciting to be here.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I want to talk a little bit about your background first, Tim. You're VP of Digital Transformation at Kelly Services. Kelly Services, Fortune 500 company in the talent business. Can you just sort of pinpoint for us where you are inside that organization and what kind of scope you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined Kelly Services about 7 years ago, but I've been in the industry for 21 years. So I kind of have a strong background in recruiting. I started as a recruiter, actually have a business background. Over the years, as you know, everything has become much more technical, much more digital. So the more I interacted with new technologies that would come into the organization in staffing and recruiting, and the more I figured that, hey, this is going to be a big thing going forward, the more I focused on really positioning myself as an interface between the business and the IT organization, because in very many organizations there is really that disconnect between the two functions, because the business has a good understanding of what they need to do. Very often they don't really understand how technology can help to make the job better. And on the other hand, IT is very often very structured, but does not really fully understand the business side of the equation. So I started to focus on these activities, really position myself as the translator, so to speak, between the two functions. And that eventually led into me taking on more responsibility for technology implementation, requirement gathering, solutioning. And eventually we in the Kelly organization realized that we need to have a more digital approach towards a strategy, not figuring out, hey, I need a new piece of technology, let's implement it, let's do that in a very smooth, effective way, but rather take a look at things holistically. And then right now, every organization I think in the world is thinking about how to transform, because the new capabilities that digital brings to organizations is really changing everything as we know it. And that's what led to the creation of my role and what I do today.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, because I spent time as a recruiter myself, and it was really the internet that caused me to get back into technology. Right. And so there is this big chasm, right, between what the business wants to do and what the IT organization is doing, and how it supports the business can be challenging. And I think the internet was that one place where you saw business and technology working really seamlessly together. What do you need to do to get that to happen in a Fortune 500 like Kelly?
So you need to have stamina. I think that's an important point, just because a lot of people in operations have a very traditional point of view, especially if they've been with an organization or in the industry for 20 plus years. The default operating model is always, hey, we need to have more headcount. We have an issue with scheduling interviews with candidates because we have so many interviews that our customers want to do. Okay, we need more interview coordination personnel to help do that. Instead of saying, hey, there's new technology out there that actually allows you to bypass the human intervention and have automated interview scheduling. The business doesn't really know about it, and very often the IT organizations is they didn't ask for a solution like that. So let's not do that. That's a common issue that I think a lot of legacy organizations face today, and we're definitely trying to break this up and solve for it.
Okay, so that it's interesting, because that chasm is something that you're saying is basically just there partly because of the way each operation thinks about what it's doing, right? That the IT organization is not thinking about it because the business is not asking them the right question, right? So how do you educate each of those two groups? I mean, is it education of the two groups that changes their behavior, or do you just act in the middle as somebody who reinterprets everything that each group says and somehow comes up with, well, we have to go left instead of right?
Right. So we spend a lot of time trying to train the organization, IT plus the business. And we realize that it's very hard to do because a lot of people don't have the experience and they don't have the right mindset. Plus, they also don't have the bandwidth to keep up to date with what's happening in the technology world. So kind of like in our world, we introduced what we call business analysts that kind of like actually sit between the two functions, kind of like have a good understanding of IT and have a good understanding of the business, and really kind of like try to connect and kind of like act as the interface that we talked about earlier. Because I think it's super important to not only look at specific technologies that you have today, but also understand what else could a technology do in your organization, or how could you really leverage the technology that you're already invested in to kind of like solve new issues that you probably haven't thought about before. And I think that's kind of like creating this momentum that every organization needs to transform and redesign their operating model to become a more digital one.
Yeah, that's interesting because, at Avature, we sold a lot to the business. Mm-hmm. Okay. As we started selling bigger and bigger systems, we started selling sometimes to the IT organization. Mm-hmm. But, what you're pointing out is interesting because more and more now, we seem to be interacting with sort of another group, a group that is more digital services group. There's a lot of different names for them, but to me, it seems more like sort of digital product design to a certain extent.
Correct.
I mean, isn't that really what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's kind of like diffusing or fusing into the product world, exactly as you explained it. I mean, kind of like we're a user of Avature, and kind of like one example that I always kind of like use. We started with a very traditional ATS/CRM journey. We needed to have a technology that kind of like would solve specific issues in the recruiting space, but then we pretty quickly realized that Avature kind of like has a business process automation and business process management capabilities. And once you understand that and you start to think beyond the traditional use cases and say like, hey, we could potentially also use this for onboarding or for management of payroll outsourcing solutions or whatever it is, then all of a sudden you have like this world of endless possibilities and opportunities where you have a technology in-house and then eventually say like, hey, let's repurpose this technology to solve other issues you have in your business. If you don't understand the capabilities that the technology has, and if you don't understand the problems that the business has, you wouldn't even be able to solve this issue. And I think that's kind of like the beautiful world of digital transformation, because now you can solve issues and problems with technology in ways that kind of like were not there before.
And are you doing this just for Kelly internally, or are you doing this for the customers of Kelly?
Yeah, so we serve two user groups, and one is the internal kind of like talent acquisition and HR organization where we use Avature products, but we also kind of like provide outsourced services to end customers. And obviously that makes it a bit more complicated because all of a sudden you're not operating in your own kind of like environment, you're not operating within the realm of your own IT organization, but you also kind of like need to involve the customer's IT organization, work with the end buyer who eventually kind of like has to provide kind of like resources and eventually will pay for the service that we're providing, and that makes it kind of like a bit more complex. But you're absolutely right. I think that's also an additional kind of like point of differentiation for us as an organization to kind of like take the learnings we have with our own technology projects and then basically kind of like implement it on behalf of customers to solve their issues, which is like exciting and super fascinating when you think about it.
Does that change the composition of the team that you have that does this? Or do you use the same team to do the digital product development inside of Kelly as you use to go out and actually meet with, a big customer?
So basically we have kind of like one team that's actually doing that. They wear multiple hats, and there are certain roles that focus more on the customers and other roles that focus more on the internal kind of like populations. But I think the important point, my experience is that if you have people boxed in and only focus on specific challenges or specific functions, then you're gonna like eliminate the opportunity for cross-pollination. And I think that is super important, because when we go out, build something and learn something for a specific customer that we can then also apply internally, that's a win-win situation, and vice versa. So I think kind of like having this dynamic and also making sure that people understand that there are really multiple user groups and customer groups that we need to serve kind of like makes us much more flexible and also mentally much more agile.
Is this a push or a pull with the customers? Are they calling you up and saying, hey, come and do this for us? Or are you sort of explaining to them what can be done and then you sort of pitching it?
So it's interesting because kind of like over the last couple of years, the dynamic massively changed. In the past, it was always a push. You had to come in, you needed to implement and explain new technologies, and it was really, really a tough sell because customers were like, yeah, but we already have a technology solution and on. So today, the momentum has massively, massively changed, where customers actually expect us to come in and lead with technology and really educate them on what's happening in the market today. What are the big trends? What are the mega trends that they need to prepare for? And how do our solutions that we provide actually allow them kind of like to achieve their goals faster and better? And potentially also, how can we, through our flexibility, solve issues that their own IT organization can't? Just because they're not agile enough, they're not set up and organized in a way that allows them for specific problem solving. They're more implementing kind of like specific kind of like solutions that they've built once and then they run and maintain it. And that's kind of like a super interesting dynamic over the last couple of years. Kind of like one last kind of like point on that I wanted to bring, because kind of like our sales teams are also going through massive transformation. 5 years ago, we would hardly talk about any technology or do any live demos. We would talk about technology, but it was mainly on PowerPoint. Now, every customer pitch, every customer presentation we do as a Kelly organization involves a demo element. And that makes it super interesting and also changes the momentum in the sales teams, because now we need to bring kind of like demo engineers in, we need to bring sales engineers in, and people that not focus on the relationship building and relationship management aspect as it used to be in the past. It's like a super dynamic environment right now.
Yeah, that's it's kind of like Avature's story too. I mean, you know, when we in our early years, we had to sort of describe everything we were doing and convince people that, you know, it needed to be done. And today now we see people saying, well, you know, you got to tell me what needs to be done.
Right.
But it does put a it not only does it change sort of the people you go to market with, but it changes the way you set up the project, right? Because you come into a company and they're saying, okay, you know, I want this thing to happen. I want it to happen in this certain time. And you start giving them a vision, right? And do you run into additional pressures inside their organization that prevent you from actually executing on that vision? You know, what's the difficulty on the ground once you start doing something like this with a customer?
So a couple of difficulties, but I think kind of like first of all is expectation of speed, because customers are being like from traditional technology vendors, they're being sold a seamless solution. Hey, we have open APIs. Here we can implement that fairly quickly. And very, very often, as you know better than I do, it's not as easy as that.
Right.
And it takes time, and it kind of like takes a lot of scoping and workflow design. So I think that's kind of like the big thing, that because salespeople tend to overpromise a bit and they want to kind of like make the customer happy, and then eventually they're out. So I think the second piece, and that's kind of like something we learned the hard way, is that all of a sudden, once you talk about technology and you want to bring a technology element into a program, all of a sudden the customer IT organization is part of the conversation, and they might not always like that. So we have a lot of kind of like conversation, a lot of pushback around security, which rightfully so is a very, very important point, but also kind of like the customized solutions that we're building on our own kind of like need to go through certification processes, need to go through SOC 2 Type 2 is a great example, kind of like of a certification that customers expect these days. So you need to really prepare in order to make sure you have everything set up, because otherwise it can delay a project significantly. And I think that's kind of like one of the big learnings we had over the last couple of years, that we need to enable our teams, we need to arm them, but also do a lot of homework so that our products and solutions, the tech solutions we go to market with, are actually kind of like ready to be sold and ready to be implemented.
Yeah, I think that's key, because you know, now there seems to be a very, very strong sense of urgency. Certainly in our customer base, we need solutions and we need them yesterday. But digital transformation takes a lot of time, and it's not actually for us the time it takes to configure the system. It's really the time it takes for the customer to decide what configuration they want.
Right.
And you know, when you get into that process, you're not going in there necessarily with the configurers. You're sometimes going in there with consultants. How much consulting do you have to do before you think a customer knows what they want?
Good question. I think more than we actually track and kind of like fully understand today, because the reality is, even from the first outreach or the first conversation we have to do consultative selling these days. So it's not that kind of like you open the relationship and there's like a first workshop and then you kind of like fly in a couple of consultants that kind of like start to educate the customer, but it's more a month-long or maybe year-long process with multiple touch points that kind of like we need to have with the customer, with multiple content pieces that we need to provide the customer with, so that they really understand what's important and what's expected there. So it's not really like that one intervention. Hey, let's do an education session. Hey, let's consult with the customer on how to do that best. But it's really kind of like bringing them up to speed and kind of like bringing them to a level that they really have the maturity to have a deep conversation with us. And I think that's kind of like also a big change that I've seen over the last years.
Yeah, I agree. I think with our customers and with our prospects, we've started to say to them, while you're thinking about what product to buy, could you work with either us or someone else to start sorting out your business processes and sort of define what you want inside your transition, what you want to come now, what you want to come later, because there is this sense that you want to sort of tuck everything into the implementation,
right?
And if you try to do that, you really push out your delivery dates, right?
Exactly the point. One additional thing I want to kind of like follow up on what you just said. One additional point, when you think about it, I mean, we are a service provider. So we provide outsourced solutions to our customers. And when you think about the average contract duration, it's probably 3 years, 4 years, 5 years max. So whereas if you implement a massive technology project like an ERP or an ATS, you have a much longer runtime. So basically, kind of like the challenge we have is that we have shorter implementation cycles. People expect a much faster time to productivity. They want this kind of like to be set up like now, and then we can't just wait kind of like for 2 years or 3 years to build specific features, have a very sophisticated roadmap, because by the time we roll something out, the contract already might be over. And that's kind of like the additional pressure point that we feel very, very often, so that it's important to make sure that we have these conversations in the beginning and explain kind of like about the maturity and how things were going to grow, and that certain efficiencies might not happen before year 3, 4, or 5, so that the customer understands that it's basically an evolution and it's a journey. And that's kind of like what the outsourcing is becoming realistically, right?
Yeah, it's changing a lot,
Yeah.
Right. And technology is going to continue to change, so that journey is going to continue to change. How much are you doing with AI now? And obviously that's come up as a conversation with all of your customers.
Yeah. So it's super interesting. Everybody wants to talk about AI. I just last week, actually, while being here in the US, visited one of our major customers in New York City. And they had an offsite for their leadership, and they wanted to bring somebody in to kind of like really understand what's the impact of AI on the workforce, HR, procurement. Interestingly enough, for the first time, I feel that AI is becoming real. You know, like I used to make the joke, AI is the new big data. Big data was a big buzzword on all the like HR conferences a couple of years ago. It wasn't really big data. And I think kind of like the AI we've been seeing over the last couple of years was like very, very basic, like pattern recognition and really kind of like matching, like nothing really sophisticated. But I think kind of like now through the after the launch of ChatGPT, everybody's kind of like starting to understand the impact of generative AI, how that's going to change how teams work, how that's kind of like changing how managers and also talent is interacting with the technology, and what significant productivity boosts we're going to see going forward. So we do a lot of internal work right now and trying to figure out what's the right use cases for generative AI. We kind of like armed our first kind of like pilot recruiting teams in the RPO space with a generative AI tool that we built ourselves, and the first results are super promising. I think people don't really understand what the actual impact really is going to be, because they're all kind of like looking at ChatGPT right now as this fun tool. Hey, my kid is using that to do homework, or hey, I wrote a poem about my dog and it's like super funny. But when you think about kind of like the day-to-day kind of like transactional activities that a a person in HR or in the talent acquisition space is doing, then it's going to add massive value. So I think that's kind of like one of the biggest bets from my point of view. I'm super bullish on generative AI.
Yeah, I think it's a sea change.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's a bigger one than Web 2.0. I don't know if it's bigger than the browser, because the browser, we're still really experiencing the impact of the browser today. But it's certainly moving past the hype stage. Well, I wouldn't say moving past the hype stage, because there is a huge amount of hype. And to some extent, I imagine you have to go in and sort of cut down some of that hype, right? I mean, we certainly do. And it sometimes customers take that as negative, and you can say, well, it's not negative. We have to deploy things that are going to add value in the short term, the medium term, and the long term. We have to distinguish between those, and you can implement hype. But I think the interesting thing is that you deploy, you advise, and then you deploy, and then you run on the system, right? So you're delivering your service. For instance, on Avature, you deliver your service on our system. So you don't get to deploy and run. You live in that system. How much do you find yourself evolving the system while you're in the middle of your service delivery phase?
I think it's becoming almost the norm now. And I mean, kind of like the thing for us, when I think back about like Kelly's Avature journey, I think we had the first conversation. We were a big Avature user in the past, then there was a change of strategy, moved to another system. I think in 2016, kind of like we came back to Avature. And
you were the first Avature customer, just so you know, right? 2008. May like 2008.
Before I kind of like joined Kelly, but it's good to hear that. I think the important point for us, when we made the decision to go back to Avature in 2016 after that break, I fought hard to get investment for a dedicated kind of like team that I wanted to build, so that we're not 100% relying on Avature from an implementation and configuration perspective, because I try to introduce that new mantra that I always call it like configuration over customization, just to make sure that we have the capability, if a new customer comes in, wants to change a workflow or wants to make kind of like some changes, that we are not 100% reliable on Avature, because we understand kind of like the implementations you're doing, the amount of new customers you're winning, but that we have kind of like the ability to do small changes kind of like on our own.
Right.
And that was a hard sell internally, I have to say, just because kind of like a lot of management said, like, why would we even kind of like hire somebody? Isn't that what the vendor should be doing? Why we bought a technology? Why even configure it? Couldn't we define what we wanted? But kind of like we knew that from an outsourcing perspective, there were always customer requirements that would come in as the project or the program would evolve. And I think this is like where Avature was like super important for us, because it gave us the flexibility to change things on the fly. You want to, open kind of like a new target group for hiring. You want to go into early talent hiring now. You need a different workflow than if you want to hire kind of like seasoned engineers. And I think that's kind of like the flexibility that we looked for, because everything is evolving all the time. There is no static process that you hard code into a system and then you run it for 10 years. These times are over. You need to have flexibility. You need to be agile.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how I describe transformation. I say that the transformation isn't a one and done process. You don't start as one thing and then come out as something else. The transformation is to that continuously improving agility that you need to sort of survive and prosper in the business world.
Exactly.
And it's a new standard, right? It's a benchmark that we didn't have 10 years ago, and it's moving higher every day, really. I don't know if I know where it goes going forward, but I know it's moving higher.
Correct.
So, is that something that you explain to your customers, or is that something that's not important in that process, that you just come in and say, well, we'll have a digitally transformative experience, and we're going to deliver this service, and but just tell us what you need? Or do you describe to them actually how you're operating and why you're operating?
So
is that important to them?
Yeah, it is super important. I think kind of like a lot of organizations don't understand first, this is, we talked about upskilling and educating the customer, consulting with the customer. As soon as they understand, once we started talking about it, explaining and showcasing some examples, they actually value that capability, because every organization I talk to today has gone through a bad technology implementation at some point in time.
Absolutely.
Not only in the HR space, finance, procurement, wherever. So I think everybody is becoming kind of like much more aware of the dangers of bad technology implementations. And I think also everybody understands that everything is happening so fast. There might be new regulation, there might be new law coming in, there might be like organizations acquiring a new company that requires them to change course. And I think kind of like showcasing the capabilities kind of like we have as a Keller organization when it comes to Avature is always a plus point. One example I wanted to share, I'm not going to kind of like name the customer, but we actually were in a conversation with an Avature customer a couple of months ago, and they talked about specific issues they have, and we knew how to solve it. So basically, we could give them advice. It was a minor thing from a configuration perspective, but really positioning us as that kind of like digital expert, having the capability to also kind of like support our customers from a configuration perspective, is becoming a big differentiator for us.
Well, that's good to hear. I think differentiation is really the essential thing that you have to do these days to succeed. And I think that that's part of what digital transformation is about, really, right? It's continuous improvement, and it's differentiation, so that what you offer is valuable enough to set you apart. How do you feel about Kelly right now and this digital transformation, both internally and from a business perspective? I mean, you've sort of defined a group, you've got some methodologies, I assume, that you're bringing forth to the clients. You've got new technology that's coming into the platform from Avature side. You've got growing expectations from the customers as well. Is this would you describe this as a very challenging time for you personally, or are you having fun doing this? And,
honestly, I have so much fun doing it. It is hard at times. I mean, we're, I think, 77 or 78 years old. Kelly is a very, very legacy kind of like organization. And we have identified over 200 initiatives that we're executing on when it comes to the overall digital transformation of the entire organization. I feel that right now is a perfect time, honestly. When I think about how I started kind of like 22 years ago in recruiting, this is the most exciting time right now that we're in. Just because technology is becoming so readily available, there are new tools that allow you to really rethink and reinvent the way you're doing business. And I truly believe that organizations are going to be successful that are fully creative, because everybody can buy a specific piece of technology. Everybody can buy kind of like a tool and use it. But the question is, how do you tweak it? How do you use it? How do you kind of like get the maximum kind of like functionality and productivity out of the technology? I think that's kind of going to be a big differentiator going forward. And that's kind of like what I love about it, because it requires and forces us to be creative and use tools like Avature kind of like in ways that they have never been used before. And that's not always easy for Avature. I mean, you and I had the conversation kind of like about that, but we're really pushing the boundaries. And I think that's going to be a kind of like important point for us going forward. So I'm super excited about that.
Well, you're a busy man.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and look forward to getting together with you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dimitri.
Thank you.